Hello, you're very welcome along to the Matchbook NFL Week 15 podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Hussey, joined, as always, by the unholy trinity, as Sully called them once upon a time, Rob Pizzola, Fabian Sommer, and Drew Dinsick. Guys, we were chatting World Cup. It's back to NFL now. Let's switch on. Suma was disinterested in our pre-World Cup chat, unfortunately, given Germany got knocked out of the group stage the last two tournaments. Suma, take it away on why do you think the Chiefs are potentially underrated going into the playoffs? I like this take.
So their Super Bowl odds have not really dropped significantly, but they are behind the Bills now. Home field advantage will play a role for sure, but I think the Chiefs offense is playing an incredibly great season. Like Mahomes is the front runner for MVP right now. Arguably, not arguably, it's been the best offense in the league. And now for the late regular season rally and for the playoffs, they are getting Mecole Hardman back, who has been a major part of their offense over the past 5 games before he went to IR. And they are getting Kadarius Toney healthy. He might not survive one or two games with his hamstrings, but at least there is still upside on the personal side for the Chiefs. Great quarterback, great offensive line, a very diverse receiving group outside of Travis Kelce, who is an animal anyway. So they could really enter the playoffs being a lot more healthy than they have been in the past like 4 to 5 weeks, where they have been a great offense to begin with. So I think that there is still some upside with the Chiefs when they get Mecole Hardman and Kadarius Toney back.
Okay, yeah. A few comments, Rob, on people are wondering in the comments, who are you supporting in the Bengals Bucs game? We'll get to that. I want you to hold that to your thought because you are not too happy with the Bucs. I think we'll leave it at that. Tell us a little bit about why you think there's a question mark over arguably nearly every single of the potential Super Bowl winners this year.
Yeah, I think if you go top to bottom in the NFL based off of like what your power rankings are, I think we're going to enter the playoffs here with like concerns for every single team that's going into the playoffs, whether that's Josh Allen's elbow for Buffalo. We'll talk a little bit about Bills and Dolphins, but there's been a huge drop-off in the Bills offense since Josh Allen's elbow injury. You look at the Chiefs are turning the ball over. They almost lost to the Broncos last week. Like the Broncos have not been live against anyone in a long time. Chiefs looked horrible against them. The Eagles have played nobody this year. Like they played Dallas with Cooper Rush. But honestly, look at the Eagles schedule. Try to find the toughest game is probably week 1 against Detroit. They have played no one this season. So they're going to be a huge question mark going into the playoffs if they're going to be that team that hasn't been quote unquote battle tested. Bengals are now suffering from injuries. Cowboys almost lose to the Texans. 49ers have Brock Purdy at quarterback. So you go down the list of all these playoff teams, and there's really way more question marks than I think relative to previous years as well. So love these comments this week. This chat has been lit up. I love this week. But yeah, this year's NFL, I mean, it's way more of a crapshoot than I would have thought a couple weeks ago. I think there's no team that's really standing out amongst the bunch right now.
Yeah, Suma just can't help himself. I remember throwing a comment up a couple of weeks ago, and Suma just laughed for about a minute, and I was like, "That's my fault now."
These guys are all stand-up comedians in the chat. Every single person here, yeah.
Drew, talk to us about last week. It was a tough one.
Oh yeah, yes. It was my worst week of the season, but it was not good. Took it on the chin, and it's just a healthy reminder of how difficult this market is to beat, particularly late in the season. I look at my power rankings right now. Less than a field goal separates the 9th best team from the 24th best team. So that just tells you that all of these games should be relatively closely lined, and it's going to take intangibles, motivations, and penalties and injury luck sometimes to get your card home. And I think that, a lot of the losses that I suffered last week, namely my edge of the entire week in Steelers was, it was over in first series. Kenny Pickett goes out, and Mitch Trubisky was not ready to take on that Ravens defense, particularly when the field got tight. And, I think, and to kind of piggyback on Rob's point, like the NFL is wide open. It was wide open last year. It's wide open this year. The Rams were extremely lucky to be Super Bowl champions, as evidenced by the fact that injuries bounced against them this year, and they're one of the 2 worst teams in the NFL. It took a pretty unbelievable, sort of break for not just path, but specifically game outputs for the Bengals to get to the Super Bowl last year. And I don't think we should be surprised, whoever our, at the end of the day, whoever our two competitors are. I think still the Bills and the Chiefs as complete teams, if they're healthy, stand above the rest. But other than that, I don't think that you can really be surprised by what happens from here on in.
Yeah, and absolutely. Even the playoff picture is getting more and more competitive. It'll be interesting and fascinating. We're going to do a couple of minutes just with a Q&A at the start. For those listening on the podcast or watching back the live stream, do check out the description if you want to get straight into the guys' thoughts on the games. If you want to get straight to podcast best bets as well as other bets, they're all there as well. So a couple of questions, keep them coming in the comments. I'll give this to you on Suma because would love to hear the guys' thoughts on Hurts versus Mahomes MVP race at current market prices. So I think at the moment, Jalen Hurts is a favorite. I actually tweeted out about Mahomes after he made that incredible underarm. Sorry, I was trying to do there. I dropped the pen. Underarm throw, and then since then he kind of it went downhill fairly quickly after that. And Jalen Hurts is a strong favorite in this market. Do you agree?
I don't agree that he's a strong favorite. I'm looking at odds from Circa Colorado right now. They have Jalen Hurts as a minus 140 favorite right now. Which, to be honest, comes a little bit unexpected after last week. I thought that, yes, the gap should become smaller between Mahomes and Hurts, but I did not expect these kind of odds, to be honest. I still think that if the Chiefs finish the season strong, or let's say in terms of what their expectations are, and Mahomes continues to play well, he would still be my personal front runner. And I think that Jalen Hurts has to have some really strong games down the stretch, especially against Dallas next week, in my opinion. And we should also think about the possibility of Jalen Hurts maybe resting one game at the end of the season when the Eagles are already or would have already clinched home field advantage. And it looks like Mahomes might have to play week 18 in terms of AFC seeding. So that's probably Mahomes' advantage. Personally, I still would trust Mahomes more to finish the season strong. And Jalen Hurts probably needs one or two more monster games to win that.
Yeah, Drew, I know you love these markets.
Yeah, these prices are broken. There's a way to make money on this. Hurts can win the MVP, but he must beat the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah.
If he loses that game in that head-to-head, and that is deemed, the one tough road game that he played all season he lost, people will not vote for him, I don't think. Which means if you want to ride with Hurts, you can just bet Philly money line in that game. And I think you're getting a better price than whatever, minus 160, minus anything. They're dogs right now in the look ahead. And unless something crazy happens injury-wise, you could probably take a healthy crack on Philly at a better price to win that game than betting Hurts to win the MVP right now. I think realistically, this is Mahomes to lose. And I would bet Mahomes at whatever the best price you can find and just put that in your pocket for safekeeping. There is an outside chance that Mahomes continues to turn the ball over, in which case a sprint down the stretch by Burrow or Allen could put them back into the mix. If you feel like Burrow is the guy that's going to do that, I think moneyline rollover of their next 4 games is going to do better for you than betting his current price, which is in the 8 to 1 range in some spots. 10 to 1 maybe the best you can find. You're going to get better than 10 to 1. Bengals beating the Bucs, the Patriots, the Bills, and the Ravens. That is just a hellacious Final Four games for that that Bengals team. And Allen, he's been forgotten about. He's in the 20 to 1 range. If the Bills get the 1 seed, people are going to at least give him consideration from a voting standpoint. And he could have statistics that dwarf Hurts, even if Hurts is 4-2. If Hurts finishes 15-2. And Allen, and doesn't play the last week of the season because he doesn't have to. But Allen does and gets the 1 seed in a more competitive AFC and has the statistical advantage. He may get consideration as well. So I think there are 4 realistic quarterbacks with a chance. And I think you can kind of take different paths to try to capture value in the market. And there's also a chance that Hurts beats Dallas, Burrow wins out, and it still goes to Mahomes because he's going to have potentially 5,000 and change passing yards this season, which could be an all-time record. So, I think this is still Mahomes' award to lose, and there's ways to capitalize on that with the market price right now.
Yeah, Rob, very quick thoughts. I know you don't play too much overall in these outright markets, but do you think the prices are more or less right on Hurts?
I actually disagree with these guys. I think Hurts is underpriced right now.
Ooh,
So
wow.
I think that this is very much a narrative-driven award. And I think what hurts Patrick Mahomes is he's actually been consistently performing at this level for so long that it becomes the expectation. And he's not doing any, like the average fan is not wowed by Patrick Mahomes' performance this year because it's just like the baseline for him at this point. So I think that with the voting change this year, where it's like kind of that Olympic style vote, you can scrap Joe Burrow. You can probably scrap Josh Allen as well. I think it's a 2-horse race, regardless of whether the Bills get the 1 seed. But I see a scenario in which Jalen Hurts loses to the Cowboys and still possibly gets this award because his season has been so consistently good. And on top of that, I think that the Chiefs they'll likely win out because their schedule's frankly pretty easy. It's Texans, Seahawks, Raiders, Broncos, Raiders, I think flip around the last 2 games. But I think if Hurts loses, that he also still has some potential upside, and that if the Chiefs still lose one of those games, he'll get it. So I don't think Hurts should get the MVP. I would not vote him number 1 personally, but I think that he is more likely than minus 140 to win it at this point.
Yeah, final comment.
Yeah, I think just for anyone who has value in any awards market as of this date, hedging while minus EV most of the time is not in the award space. It is how you finish. It is not how you start. And this is coming from someone who I think got second place in almost every awards category last year. And as of December 20 whatever, I had Mac Jones 20-1 rookie of the year. He was minus 1,000 this time last season, and he lost to Jamar Chase, right? So the recency bias plays into all of these awards. So if hedging is your question, as opposed to entering the market, if you're going to enter the market, you got to do it intelligently. If you are trying to kind of evaluate your position, I don't think hedging is a bad decision in any way, shape, or form.
I agree. You're relying on 50 voters, right? Who are a combination of writers and broadcasters. Good luck you don't even know who the voters are. Good luck trying to get into everyone's head. But I think Hurts has been, at the end of the day, people look at Jalen Hurts' season. They'll ignore the fact that the Eagles played nobody for most of the year. And they'll look at the numbers and they'll say, this guy was like consistently good for the entire year. And they're going to be a 1 or 2 loss team. That's going to be, I think almost impossible to pass up. And I would never vote for her. Mahomes gets this MVP vote for me like every day of the week, but that's me. And I try to think about it from the voter perspective. And I think it's completely different from the voter perspective.
Final comment, as always, to PJ Walker. Thank you for joining this live stream after a few absent weeks. PJ Walker's 2023 MVP campaign starts now. So there you go. You heard it here first on the Matchbook Betting Podcast. Guys, thanks a million for some of those questions. Well, it was only one in the end, but we managed to get to, but we're running low on time. There's another one we might get to at the end, so do keep them coming in. There's 5 games we're going to cover in the slate because I don't think we'll take too long in the books, but Rob does want to get a few things off his chest for that game. It's Dolphins at Bills, Lions at Jets, Cowboys at Jags, Titans at Chargers, and Bengals at the Bucs. And if you are watching the live stream or watching us back, do hit that thumbs up if you're enjoying the content. Dolphins at the Bills. It's Dolphins 3.85, Bills 1.31. Dolphins getting a 7-point head start, and the total is 44. We'll go to you, Drew, on this one. You do like Bills to cover here at -7.
Yeah, I don't feel great about it, but I didn't understand why yesterday there was a move to buy back on the over and also support the Dolphins because I feel like the Dolphins offense is in the toughest spot here. I'll happily take Bills at 7 on the basis of I think the standout unit is going to be the Bills defense. Dolphins have, they've had an amazing season. The wrinkles that Mike McDaniel has brought are refreshing. I love it. I love him. I love the Dolphins in general as long-term buyer of this as a franchise, considering the talent on this team. But we now have tape from 2 legitimate defenses. They took a huge step up in competition from who they were playing to play the Niners. The Niners had the perfect game plan for them, getting physical with the receivers. Their receivers come out of that game beaten up. Jalen Waddle maybe playing at about 70% right now. Tyreek Hill somewhere in the 80% range. He's not 100%. What do the Chargers do? They watch that tape. They go with a relatively similar approach. They get physical, double Tyreek Hill. Jalen Waddle can't get separation, and Tua's throwing shot puts. His mechanics look like they have regressed to me. And I don't know that any of that is fixed on a week where you have to travel back across the country and then fly north and play in these kind of conditions. Difficult to predict what the weather is going to be like on Saturday night as we record here in the middle of the day on a Thursday, but it does not look good. If it is snow, maybe this is an overplay. Maybe it's going to be a fun watch regardless. But if this is a wintry mix, if it's wet, if it looks at all like the first half of that Bills Jets game, I don't know that I see how Dolphins are going to score much in that environment. I think Bills in general still can take advantage of the mismatch they have with the Dolphins O-line, which is bottom 3 right now in the NFL, and 2 is going to be somewhat of a sitting duck there. So Dolphins could completely surprise me with an entirely new approach that catches the Bills by surprise as well. But I think the Bills know we need to get physical with Tyreek Hill and let the weather do the rest.
Rob, I see you nodding just at the end there. Do you see the Dolphins coming in with a new approach? Because it's hard to get away from how poor they were against the Chargers last week.
I do. So you have back-to-back weeks now, 49ers and Chargers, as Drew mentioned, where these teams have done a really, really good job of taking away the middle of the field. So especially the Chargers last week on Sunday Night Football, they basically knew the routes that Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle were going to run, which was basically a lot of deep ends, and their corners and safeties really guarded the middle of the field. They left the outsides of the field open, and the Dolphins just weren't able to adjust to that at all. So this is 2 weeks in a row now. 2 teams have done the exact same thing to them. I would be very surprised. I know it's a short week, but I'd be surprised if they come out and run the exact same style of offense, because I'm sure the Bills are watching that. They have a very good defensive coordinator, Leslie Frazier, who probably is going to run that exact same game plan. So I do subjectively feel that there's going to be some wrinkles in the Dolphins offense this week where we'll see them try to do some different things. I don't know if that's going to work out or not. I don't know that Tua can make those sideline throws on those deep outs or anything along those lines, but I do feel like that's going to be a little bit different. My hesitation with the Bills right now is just their offense. And this is sort of why I didn't lay the points with them against the Jets last week. I think they were a little bit unlucky not to cover that big number, but it's tough for them to separate right now. If we look at Josh Allen's numbers since his elbow injury, he's dropped to 13th in EPA per drop back, 16th in EPA against man coverage, 13th in EPA against zone, 29th in EPA against the blitz, 21st in EPA against 2 high safety looks. He's just fallen off. Like, it's completely fallen off. And now it's not just entirely him. He's lining up a lot more under center than he was in the shotgun. There's been like this dynamic shift or fundamental shift on the Bills offense overall, but it's not the same Buffalo offense that we remember. In the past, I'd love to lay points with the Bills at home. I'd have no problem because I'd be very comfortable with them scoring into the 30s on any given game. However, I no longer feel that way about the offense anymore. I think it's like a completely different team where their defense is extremely reliable and the offense is not. I make this game just south of 7. Haven't bet the Dolphins, though, because of the schedule is a disaster. Short week going cross country from warm to cold. Like they've been done no favors by the league with this scheduling spot. But I mean, if I had to play the game, it would be Miami for me.
Okay. Yeah. Some interesting shouts. Suma, talk to us a little bit about some of the stuff Rob was talking about there about potentially being able to change their scheme here, because like the lad said, this is definitely a tough spot in terms of scheduling for sure.
Yeah, there has to be some changes. What the Dolphins are doing is that they try to attack the middle of the field primarily, but at a very deep level. So let's say 7, 8 to 18, 20 yards down the field. That's their soft spot to attack. And that's what the Niners, but even more so, the Chargers took away with inside leverage from their defensive backs and always putting that robber safety right or even that middle linebacker right into those spots where usually these vertical routes over the middle of the field for Tyreek Hill and Waddle would stop and where Tua would hit them. What they are not doing for whatever reason, and what I would expect them to do this week, is just try to grab everything underneath that the opposing defense is giving you. Like, let Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle run some deep routes, clear up all the space, and then try to hit your running backs, tight ends, or Trent Sherfield underneath and try to stretch the defense horizontally. Because when defenses vacate so much personnel over the middle of the field, like the Chargers have done, there will be open space underneath, and then there will be yards after the catch opportunities to the sidelines because there is a lot of green grass on the outside left, or there was a lot of green grass left by the Chargers. That's what I would expect the Dolphins to do. There is just, in my opinion, no way they're going to run the same offense like they did the last 2 weeks. There has to be something underneath, really trying to attack the Bills defense horizontally, which also means like there will not be as many explosive plays. They might need more plays to get down the field. And on the other side, like Rob has mentioned, I also don't trust the Bills offense too much. Josh Allen has been falling off a cliff somewhat. And he, for whatever reason, always plays bad in these tough weather games in Buffalo. For whatever reason, he was drafted with a big cannon of an arm. He can play in bad weather, but for whatever reason, he always underperforms in bad weather. So I could only I could only look towards the under right now. I don't have a strong opinion on the spread. Gun to my head, I would probably take the under, but yeah, it's going to be a very interesting game in terms of how the Dolphins offense is going to adjust.
Yeah, massive game for the Dolphins too. So no picks there. Robin drew sort of from different sides, and Suma's kind of leaning towards the under there if you had to have a bet. So it's great to have Saturday football back as well. So we'll kick on for the second game, but no bet. Lions 6-7 at the Jets, who are 7-6. We'll take a look at the betting as we have it currently at matchbook.com. You can back the Lions at 1.94, Jets 1.92, and Lions are getting a 1 point head start, and the over is 44.5. This is flipping and flopping a lot here on Matchbook. Suma, over to you on this one. In terms of a bet here, what are you liking at the moment?
So in terms of the side, I'm pretty neutral. I make this game around a pick'em. I have Quinn Williams out right now. Mike White's ribs injury was somewhat of a concern early in the week, but it seems like he's going to start. He will get some pain injection on game day, and I expect him to be fine. I'm kind of leaning towards the over here. Like everyone is talking about, rightfully so, that the Lions have faced a lot of bad defenses recently. The only good defense that they have faced were the Bills inside a dome. But I think they still did pretty well. And I think that there is a lot of talk about Jared Goff playing bad in bad weather. And the evidence is very, very strong. That's absolutely something to take into account. But I also think that this current state of the Lions offense has a much higher floor than, for example, when I look back at the 2018, 2019 Rams offenses that were running the same stuff all over again, and at some point defenses just knew how to play Jared Goff there. The Lions have a strong offensive line. Jameson Williams is starting to get grooved into the offense, and for as good as the Jets offense has been, not having Quinn Williams will matter. And I still think that in terms of their run game, in terms of how they attack underneath zone coverage, Amon-Ra St. Brown will have a very good matchup against whoever plays the slot for the Jets. Jameson Williams can get open on one or two plays anytime. DJ Shark might not have a shot against Sauce Gardner, but I still think that there are enough matchups for the Lions to move the ball. And on the other side, I also trust Mike White and a decent Jets receiving corps to move the ball on a, in my opinion, overrated Lions defense. So I expect both offenses to kind of move the ball here. And with a total that is in the low 40s, we don't need some 30-point banger from the Lions against that Jets defense. We are looking at a let's say a 24-21 kind of score to get this over the total. And that's what I'm leaning currently. No strong take on the side. I think this is a coin flip game to me.
Okay. Yeah. Over to you, Rob. You do have an opinion on the sides. And it's worth mentioning both these teams currently outside the respective playoff bubbles, but right in the hunt.
Yeah, it's also worth mentioning I did bet on the Lions last week, and my numbers showed an edge opposite to the Jets, even though I didn't bet them. But I like the Jets this week. I think that the market has overcorrected on the Lions very quickly based off of the win over Minnesota. And I know that they're healthier. The defense is getting better, predominantly in the pass rush. If you look at their pass rush numbers over the last 4 to 6 games, defense is getting a lot better as well. But overall, I think we kind of have to pump the brakes on the Lions just a little bit. I could talk for days about the Jared Goff splits, which everybody already knows about, indoor versus outdoor, cold weather games. I think that's real. I think there's something tangible there because this is not like a tiny sample. This is something we've seen over the majority of his career. That's not that he has never played a good game on the road, because he did. He played against the Giants this year in the cold. They won that game, no problem. However, it's a very different type of defense. And if we look at the Lions over the course of like this cover streak, but since people have started to take notice that they're playing better, this is the EPA ranks of teams that they faced in the last 6 games: 18th, 24th, 13th, which was the Bills, 25th, 31st, 29th. So they haven't played a top 10 defense in that span. And when we look at this season, there's been only 2 times where Jared Goff has had to face a top defense in terms of EPA. One was against New England. They got shut out in that game. One was against the Dallas Cowboys. They scored 6 points. Now, granted, that's a little bit misleading. Jamal Williams fumbled at the goal line in that game. But either way, we're talking about 2 bad offensive performances from the Lions in games where they've taken a step up in class in terms of the opposing defense. You can't, it's not entirely fair because the Lions did have injuries to key players or skill position players in those games as well. So you have to take that into account. But this is really the first step up in class against a real defense in a long time. The Jets ranked 6th in EPA. They ranked 7th in success rate. So that's like a monumental step up from what they've been facing. There's already a lot of familiarity here with Robert Saleh and Jared Goff. And you look at Jared Goff, when he first started against the 49ers, he had a lot of successful games. And then what eventually happened was the 49ers accumulated some personnel on defense. They made some changes. And look at Jared Goff's last 3, 4, 5 games against the 49ers when he was with the Rams, and he could not move the ball against those defenses whatsoever. I think that's another factor to take into account here. So ultimately, I think what we've had here is an overcorrection on the Lions. I think that they're a good football team overall. They're definitely better than that team in the middle of the season that was missing St. Brown and DeAndre Swift, had all these defensive line injuries. But now we're basically saying that they're essentially better than the Jets. I actually don't agree with that. I think the Jets are underrated. Obviously, Mike White's situation is that's up in the air in terms of like, we don't know the performance we're going to get out of Mike White, but it's a soft defense, which you should be able to move the ball on. And we saw that happen against Minnesota a couple weeks ago. We saw that in his first start as well. So I think this is a little bit of a short price. I played the Jets for a small play on the money line at -106. And I like them right now, and not for nothing crazy, but I just think that they're a little bit undervalued. The lines are a little bit overvalued.
Yeah, Drew, you do lean towards the Jets, but news that Zach Wilson has been elevated to backup quarterback, I guess, is pouring cold water on that, perhaps?
Yeah, I liked Rob's breakdown, and I generally agree with it, except I wouldn't even really say that there's been an overcorrection for the Lions. I think it's just that the market is finally correctly pricing them, maybe a hair over. Like, I make this game pick 'em. I make the total 44.5. And typically, if I have a small edge on the Jets in a week like this, and you have the Lions going and taking a huge step up in level of competition compared to defense, because I believe in the Jets defense. The Jets defense, even in the absence of Quillen Williams, and Quillen Williams is really, really, really good. Like, he has played incredibly well this year. He's been a huge part of their pass rush and their run stop, and he's going to be very tough to replace. That said, it's still an incredibly well schemed and just a defense that is clicking on all cylinders, getting better every week. It really feels like so. Lions step up in competition. I would generally look to play the Jets in this spot. But yeah, the injury to Mike White, and every time I hear his name on the broadcast, I do the Borat voice in my head, Mike White, and I'm sad that we're only going to get a couple more games of Mike White. But this injury is non-trivial. Like, he got absolutely destroyed in that Bills game, and it wasn't just once; it was twice. He almost certainly has bruised, if not broken, ribs. And one hit in this game, or he sleeps on it poorly Saturday night, and all of a sudden, that's Zach Wilson's music. And I don't have really any interest in being involved with Zach Wilson in this game. He may have kind of regarnered a little bit of respect in the locker room, the way he handled the benching, the way he ultimately, kind of handled himself as sort of the practice squad rep, guy in the scout team. Maybe the guys in the locker room are like, oh, he handled himself well. We're ready to play for him again. But I need to see it before I bet on it. That's for sure. So the potential for a Zach Wilson game is really what's keeping me off this one. And it's, that said, it's going to be a fascinating game. It's going to tell us a lot about both these teams because, if the Lions can prove they can do it in this situation, and if they get to 7-7, all of a sudden, this is huge leverage. My numbers would make them likely to get an NFC wildcard spot if they win this game. And just beyond proving they can do it against the top 10 defense and outdoors instead of indoors. So fun one to watch.
Yeah, massive game, as we said, for both teams trying to get that wild card spot. I will lock in a Jets money line. I think Rob has just got me there on the Jets, and you a little bit, Drew. You kind of, even though you don't want to, you've nudged us there a little bit. So we'll lock that in. It's about Jets and the money line about 1.92, although those markets a bit more liquidity was off the boards for a while earlier this morning. We'll move on to the third game, which is Cowboys at the Jags. We'll go to you first, Rob, and take a look at the betting. We've got Cowboys 1.47, the Jags 2.88. Jags are getting a 4-point head start, and the total is 48. Rob, you like the Jags here? Is this an anti-Cowboys, pro-Jags? Who's a bit under or overpriced here in this market?
This is more of a pro-Jags play than an anti-Cowboys. Obviously, Dallas looked bad last week against Houston. Didn't really have their A game. I mean, they were in danger of losing that game as a 17-point favorite. We're starting to see the emergence of Trevor Lawrence as a true quarterback in this league. And if we go back to earlier in the year, what basically we saw for, let's say, the first 8 weeks of the season is that Trevor Lawrence was able to move the ball from 20 to 20. And then they would get into the red zone, and he ranked 39th of 40 quarterbacks in red zone EPA per dropback in the first 8 weeks of the year. And now what's happening is his performance inside the red zone is catching up to how he was performing outside of the red zone. And since week 9, he's now 8th in EPA per dropback in the red zone. Since week 9, he's 2nd in EPA per dropback in the entire league. He's 1st in completion percentage. He's thrown 10 touchdowns, no interceptions. But most importantly, and why I like the chances of the Jags offense to move the ball in this specific matchup, is he's releasing the ball in 2.3 seconds. He's not even allowing the pass rush to get home. He gets the ball out very quickly, makes his reads, throws the ball, and that mitigates a lot of what the Dallas Cowboys do successfully. And now you add in all of these injuries in the Cowboys secondary with Jordan Lewis and Anthony Brown having to go on IR. They just signed Trayvon Mullen. For crying out loud. It's really a dire situation in the Cowboys secondary. So I think that the Jags will be able to move the ball in this game. Now, do I think they're going to completely shut down the Cowboys offense? No, but they're getting 4 at home. Means the Cowboys have to win by margin. I'm not sure the Cowboys defense is up to the task right now. And I'm not sure that this is the greatest matchup for them. So I'm pro Jags as it stands right now. I think that they're the team that, market's catching up to them for sure. I don't think we would have seen a 4 in this game if they had played a couple weeks ago. But definitely we're seeing Lawrence improve on a weekly basis. And I grabbed the points here with the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yeah, Drew, over to you. You're in agreement with this. I guess a lot of the same lines. Trevor Lawrence has really stepped up these last few weeks.
Yeah, you wouldn't even have seen a 4 on this last week. It was 6
you're saying
at some
that,
of the
yeah.
look ahead shops. I'm prepared to get hurt believing in the Jags. I have a lot of Jags futures from preseason where I was like, man, if you squint hard enough, sure looks like the Bengals from last year. And why can't they win a trash AFC South and then, just string together a home win and a couple of wins in the playoffs and punch their ticket to the Super Bowl? Like it's not that far fetched. And kind of going back to the top of the show, like if the Jags are your AFC rep in the Super Bowl, none of us should really be surprised because the way that they're playing right now is at least NFL average, if not better than NFL average. And, there's not that many teams that you can realistically put ahead of them in terms of, just strength in the AFC. They've dug themselves a nasty hole. Thankfully, the Tennessee Titans are not running away from them. And it's amazing to me that as we sit here, a team that was 4-8 was not eliminated from playoff contention last week, but they can play their way in basically if they get a win in this game, and the Titans don't all of a sudden find some form. So very excited to see how that plays out. I cannot believe any of the Jags tickets I have are live, but so I'm trepidatious kind of believing that they're going to be able to be consistent, but they're well coached. And they have, as kind of Rob laid out, they're getting, as good a performance out of their quarterback as anyone in the NFL is right now. And that's hugely important this time of year. So he carries that, kind of the confidence that he's playing with into these kind of a matchup. He's in great shape because Cowboys, as amazing as the Cowboys are, and they are clearly a top 3 team in the NFC, they are beaten up right now. I think Rob basically laid it out, but you're dealing with the cluster injury in your secondary. That's not good. Micah Parsons has been asked to do even more, and that has taken away from his ability to kind of focus on being a pass rusher. That's a problem. Jags offensive line is playing relatively well. I didn't think these guys were very good. I didn't have them very highly rated coming into the season, but they're performing well now. And even Trevor Lawrence is even kind of utilizing some of his mobility, and at least especially in goal-to-go situations, I like seeing him willing to just kind of get that hard yard. That's very adds a dimension that he desperately needed to add to his game. So I think the Jags are live to get the win here. We're kind of, anything that was in the dead zone here between 6 and 3, I think was worth taking the points with the Jags and hoping that you continue to get the level of performance we saw out of them last week. And I think against an average performance from the Cowboys, that's good enough to get +4 home. And if the Cowboys are still dealing with some of the issues of reshuffling their offensive line in the absence of Steele, reshuffling their secondary as they are introducing new players, then the Jags can steal this one. And at 6 and 8, I'm starting to believe even more that they could punch a ticket to the playoffs.
Yeah, they're definitely in the playoff picture, Drew. That's for sure. So, comment in here, Sommer, for you. Thoughts on the over instead of the spread now, given that it's close to a fair at 4. Were you close to playing on the point spread before moving to the total, Sommer, or do you think it's about right now?
I would still take the Jags at 4. My number is around 3.5, but I also like the over for a lot of reasons that have already been expressed. The Cowboys defense, since their bye week, they rank 6th in EPA per play, but they rank 16th in pass DVOA. That's because they have played the Packers, the Colts, the Giants, the Texans, and I think the Vikings. And there is just none of those teams even has an average passing offense. The Vikings, for as good as their record is, they have not been highly efficient when throwing the ball. So we are really talking about 5 games against below average offenses. And the Cowboys ranked 16th in pass DVOA on defense over that stretch. Jaguars top 10 offense right now. They can move the ball. I also think that they have good advantages to attack the weaknesses in the Cowboys defense. The Cowboys are, like Drew have mentioned, they're already down 2 starters at cornerback. Jalen Kearse is banged up. Trevor Diggs has been banged up. And I think that the Jaguars, with their one game, with Evan Ingram, with Christian Kirk over the middle of the field, I think they have enough weapons to attack those weaknesses that the Cowboys defense has. And on the other side, I mean, you can randomly select a time frame going back like 3, 4, 6, or 7 weeks. The Jaguars defense is trash. They cannot defend the pass. They have even been declining against the run. Trevor Walker will not play. And there has been some criticism about Trevor Walker, but I also think that he has been a very decent piece along that front four, defending the run very well. He had a good pass rushing game against Ryan Tannehill, and I just don't see how this defense is able to contain the Dallas Cowboys offense. I think both offenses have a very decent matchup. They should move the ball, and therefore I also lean towards the over here.
Okay, yeah, I think we'll lock in with Drew and Rob again. I think we'll just go with Jags plus 4.0, around 1.96 currently on Matchbook. I think that's worth taking. So that's the second bet in. We'll move on to the next game. The penultimate game we're going to be covering is the Titans at the rejuvenated Chargers. That's 7-6. Titans 2.4. Chargers heavy favorites here, 1.64. Titans getting a 3-point head start, and the total is 47. Drew, talk to me about the Chargers and talk to me about Justin Herbert. It seemed there were just a few murmurs going around that maybe he's not all he's cracked up to be, but given all he's done with this season, he deserved to have a game like that. It was amazing.
Yeah, I think if you do a redraft of all the quarterbacks in the NFL right now, he probably goes fourth. I think you take Mahomes 1, Allen 2, Burrow 3, Herbert 4. That sounds pretty likely by most people who evaluate the quarterback position. And he was masterful on Sunday night. He wasn't under duress. He had a complement of weapons. The play calling was still awful, but he overcame it because that's who he is. He's succeeding even though he's handicapped by his offensive coordinator. That's my sincere opinion. And I think he gets now to face a Titans team that is similarly facing cluster injury in the secondary. No cover corners to speak of here in this game, and difficulty covering some of the elite weapons that they have out of the backfield in space. So this Titans pass defense, I think, can be picked on. So you have strength of the offense against the weakness, strength versus weakness when you look at Chargers offense versus Titans defense. And then when you flip the script, you have strength of the Titans offense going through Derrick Henry up against the Chargers team that still has not proven that they can stop the run. They are going to have Derwin James and Sebastian Joseph Day back, I think, which makes that, the Chargers being a meaningful favorite here correct by my numbers. But I still think that, Derrick Henry is going to break a couple of big ones in this game and going to keep the Titans in it to the degree that you could see a game state that's a little bit of back and forth scoring as opposed to one team getting out to a hefty lead and playing keep away. So for those reasons, I think the over was a fair play. I got involved earlier in the week when it was under 47. It's 46.5 right now. So that is still perfectly fine. Not a huge difference between 45 and 46.5. Anything under 47, I think, is a bet on as we get closer to kickoff here. Basically just expecting the Chargers to get into the high 20s, maybe 30s, and the Titans to answer enough to get us over the total in this one.
Yeah, Sima, you like the Chargers as Patrick's comment here, which I can't answer. How do the Chargers not score 40 points here after last week?
Joe Lombardi.
Drew will like that if they scored 40. And I also
you
think
just need 7, yeah.
Yeah. I also think that Joe Lombardi might be the reason why they are not going to score 40. So if you gave me this matchup each time the past 2 seasons, I would have said this is the classic game that the Titans win and that the Chargers lose.
Yeah.
But I think right now we are talking about different circumstances. For one, the Titans offense is not good. The Titans' one game in all games with Ryan Tannehill ranks 30th in EPA per play, 29th in success rate. Derrick Henry still has a lot of yards due to volume, but they have been one of the worst rushing offenses when it comes to efficiency on a down-to-down basis. The Titans defense is also falling apart. They rank 30th in pass DVOA since week 10. Their injuries are playing a major role in that. Losing Denico Autry was huge. Losing David Long, playing basically on an all-pro level at linebacker, was huge. Their cornerbacks are banked up or on IR. Christian Fulton has not practiced so far this week. He's also DNP today. And what we saw over the past 2 weeks is that Jalen Hurts and Trevor Lawrence attacked those cornerbacks from start to finish. And they attack them down the field because that's the biggest weakness for the Titans defense right now with their lack of pass rush. And guess what? The Chargers have Keenan Allen and Mike Williams back, and they even went a little bit more deep last week. And I really expect him, for as much as I want a new offensive coordinator next week for the Chargers, I believe that Joe Lombardi will not be that stupid, and I think he will attack those cornerbacks. And then the Chargers will just have a great matchup. I think the Titans defense also bad against passes to running backs. Austin Eckler is on a record pace in terms of reception. So there are all the ingredients for the Chargers offense to have a very, very good game here. And then on the other side, I just don't think, even if Derwin James will not end up playing, I still don't think that the Titans offense, with the state of their offensive line, with their bad run game, without Treylon Burks again this week, likely, they just don't have the weapons to compete with the Chargers, and that's why I like the Bulls here.
Okay, yeah, I know you're neutral on this, Rob. You did want to briefly mention the Titans injury report.
Yeah, it's pretty rough. I mean, just looking at their practice report that came out 25 minutes ago. So no Treylon Burks, no Christian Fulton. Derrick Henry didn't practice today. Jeffrey Simmons didn't practice. Their starting right guard, Nate Davis, didn't practice. Amani Hooker, starting safety, didn't practice. So it's pretty dire for them, and you consider all the players they have on IR as well. The one challenge I have with this particular game is that I would say over the course of Brandon Staley's tenure as head coach of the Chargers, this is the type of team that would really tend to give them problems, in that I think the Titans can play a very ball control type of game, and the Chargers might not be able to stop it, especially without Derwin James, who looks like he's on track to miss this game in all likelihood this week. And what happened with Miami and the Chargers last week, Miami came out throwing the ball on LA. The first 3 passes were all incomplete. LA built up a lead, and then Miami was forced to kind of play from behind. And they really weren't able to establish the run in that game. In this game, I expect that to be very different. I think the Titans will just line up, try to pound the rock with Derrick Henry. And if there's one team in the league that can continuously just get shredded on the ground and have like no semblance of being able to take down a player like Derrick Henry, it would be the Chargers. So I will be interested in the Titans if this goes out to 3.5. I think it's trending that way based off of the Titans injury report right now. I get that the Chargers offense is healthy, but also like the Chargers offense has been healthy a lot of times in past years, and they just come up with like these nonsensical game plans sometimes because of their coaching staff. And I know the chat always comments on Drew's hatred for Joe Lombardi, but like it's real. Like they have bad coordinators there. So I'm sort of leaning towards Tennessee if this number gets pushed out a little bit further.
In my lifetime supporting Chargers, we always seem to be weak on the line in general, so it's nothing new in that regard. I do like the over 47 given the rush defense of the Chargers, Drew, and a bit of Justin Herbert magic. So I think we'll lock that in as a bet on Matchbook. We'll move on. Now, this game we're only talking about very briefly, the Bengals at the Bucs, just for the likes of Rob in particular to get a small bit off his chest about Tom Brady. For those in the chat, we were chatting a lot about Tom Brady last week. Bengals 1.55, Bucs 2.68. Bucs getting a 3.5 head start at home to the Bucs, and the total's around 45. Rob, and it's not like you were back in the Bucs. It was more, it was just too good to be true. But I had the misfortune of watching pretty much the whole game. Like I know the Bucs are brutal in general, but Brady missed some throws as well. Like, you know.
I think I overstated the downgrade from Garoppolo to Purdy in that particular start, and that's what got me on the Bucs. I'm certainly not high on Tampa. Now you get a very intriguing situation this week where you have a Bucs team that I think is terrible, has been overrated by market for a long time. They don't throw downfield anymore. They still run the ball too heavily for no success, dealing with some injuries on defense, although the injury report's a little bit more optimistic than it was last week. against a complete covering machine in the Bengals, who like cover every single week for the most part, but who now have their own injuries to deal with, whether that's T. Higgins or Tyler Boyd. Hayden Hurst is out or likely going to be out. Trey Hendrickson dealing with issues as well. Mike Hilton dealing with injury. So you have a Bengals team who just covers at like an epic clip for the most part. And it's like, okay, I don't really know what to do here, but I'm kind of done talking myself into situations where the Bucs are going to compete. Like, they're just not good, period. And like, it's a big step up in class, even with the injuries for the Bengals. It's just a big step up in class regardless. So I can understand why someone would make a case for Tampa Bay in this game, just based off of how the injuries are going to play out for Cincinnati. But man, if this goes down to 3, it's going to get like, I don't know that I'm going to be able to lay off of that, even with all the injuries. I really don't know that I will be able to do that. So done with the Bucs. They stink. Please, somebody take this division so I do not have to watch them in the playoffs.
They're going to the playoffs, Rob. They're going to the playoffs. They're going to hang on, surely.
You don't want your Cowboys to draw the buck? You don't want a first round bye for the Cowboys?
It won't. I'm a Cowboys fan, Drew, and I've experienced it all. We draw the Bucs. We lost the Bucs week 1, by the way. I say we like I'm a member of the Cowboys. We lost the Bucs week 1. That was probably the best Tom Brady has looked, other than the Germany game against Seattle. So yeah, I don't want that. No Brady in the playoffs, please.
They're going to the playoffs, unfortunately. More or less, I think. Suma, Bucs are also dead to you.
They are completely dead to me. I mean, the problem is that you always have that prior on Tom Brady, and there's still Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, and Julio Jones has had some splashes, but it just isn't there this year, and we have to accept it at some point. The offensive line is playing bad. Tom Brady doesn't want to get crushed in the pocket. Receivers are not getting separation enough. So yeah, they are dead to me too. If the Bengals can get like let's say Trey Hendrickson and T. Higgins back, I will like them. I think with Trey Hendrickson, the Bucs will lose the line of scrimmage, and with T. Higgins and with the state of the secondary for the Bucs, I think that the Bengals should move the ball here. Right now, it's basically in a state where we don't know enough about those injuries. With T. Higgins and Hendrickson, I would look towards the Bengals at the current number.
Okay, yeah, and very briefly, Drew, I know you don't have a pick here, and Sumo covered a lot of it, but it's down to the injuries, I guess. If you do want to have a bet, it would probably be late in the day.
Yeah, so the problem with also, Sumo kind of mentioned, Brady's prior. It's tough to come up with a prior when you have a player that has a deal with the devil, and the devil decides like everything's come due. You were supposed to retire and you didn't, that's the only explanation you can have for why everything has gone wrong for the Bucs this year. But I could also say that I don't agree with Rob that it was about Brock Purdy and Jimmy G difference that kind of made that a bad play last week. I think it was much more about Kyle Shanahan not correctly understanding the fact that Kyle Shanahan was going to have all of the answers he needed to solve the Todd Bowles defense, especially without some of their secondary pieces, namely the safeties. Bowles came in and he did his standard one. He has one speed. He throws a fastball. He doesn't have nuance necessarily with the way he schemes his defense. He just does one thing. And McVay solved it a while ago, and the Rams consistently give Bowles' defense a hard time. And it looked to me, at least, like Shanahan studied that film from those two head-to-heads last year and employed a lot of the same specific kind of wrinkles in his game plan that just shredded the Todd Bowles defense early and often in that one. I don't think anyone, and I don't give Todd Bowles that much of a blame, because who would have expected Shanahan comes in with this ultra aggressive approach with the backup quarterback at home? Like you think maybe he keeps it vanilla and tries to win an ugly one. Well, no, they aired it out. They were aggressive. They got their guys in space, their skill position players in space. Oh, by the way, they got their skill position players hurt, including Deebo Samuel in that game. But that aside, I think that was much more about the Niners' approach to the game than it was, the quarterback play, I thought. Bucs this week, still without a number of key defensive players. On top of the two safeties, it looks like Carlton Davis and Sean Murphy Bunting are not going to be available at cornerback. That's a problem. That's your starting four, basically. We're looking at 3 D linemen now potentially unavailable from the unit that started the season, with Vita Vea unlikely to go. This is a mash unit of a defense. And even though the Bengals are going to be without, their key weapons at wide receiver, they still should get a comfortable win here. I think the ideal approach for me to the betting this game is going to be, if the Bucs can do anything offensively in the first half here, I believe in Lou Anarumo being able to kind of tweak his defense to give the Bucs a hard time in the second half. So I'm hopeful that Bengals go into the halftime with the deficit, and we can fire away on Bengals second half.
Okay, yeah, maybe an in-play bet there perhaps for Drew, seeing how the game's going. Happy we don't have to talk about the Bucs anymore for the rest of the show. Rob, any other bets? We'll fly through these guys, but we'll try and sneak in on the air. We'll bring you a little bit over. I'd say Colts +4 at the Vikings. We missed the Vikings bashing this week. I think it's 55 minutes and we're finally getting to it, which is good.
Yeah, listen, I mean, I can be here for days talking about the Minnesota Vikings. The defense is really bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, listen, 5 straight games now where they've given up 400 yards or more. I know what people think of the Colts offense, but it's slowly improving. Under Frank Reich, when he was calling plays weeks 1 to 7, they were 28th in points per drive. That's now up to 21st since Parks Frazier has been calling plays. Honestly, our last recollection of the Colts is that game against Dallas, which was actually a very close game going into the fourth quarter on Sunday Night Football. And then the Cowboys just blew the doors off of them with a couple Matt Ryan turnovers. And the Cowboys defense does that. The Vikings defense has not been able to consistently do that. So I think Indianapolis's defense is the best unit on the field this week in this game. I don't think that there's as much separating these teams as this point spread would indicate. And it's very important to point out as well, the Vikings rush offense has steadily been going downhill. Some of that has been injuries on the offensive line. Obviously, you lose your starting left tackle. That's going to have a major impact. But ever since they traded for TJ Hawkinson, they run a ton of 11 personnel. It's their most common personnel grouping. And the success rate running the ball with Hawkinson on the field has been really bad this year, 25% versus when he's been off the field. So that trade has not worked out for them whatsoever. And if they continue to do that, they're going to be facing some 3rd and longs against a defense that got Kwity Paye back a couple weeks ago and has been consistently good this year. Not elite, but consistently good. So I like the Colts getting 4. I made this closer to, between 3 and 3.5. I like Indianapolis.
Yeah, especially with their head coach. You think Saturday game should really suit him and the way he likes to play?
It is Saturday on Saturday.
Yes,
right?
Correct. And thank you to the YouTube commenter. Thank you to the YouTube commenter for helping me out there. Big time. Much appreciated. Suma, Broncos, they're for you. You're going to take them on with points against the spread.
Yes, Broncos moved before we started our show. Would have liked to have this at 2.5 juiced, but I still like it at the it's still minus 2.5, 1.89. I didn't see that. Even better. As much as dead as the Cardinals are for me, I think the Cardinals are even more dead. I think there's just no life in the team anymore. Kyler Murray is down. Colt McCoy is dealing with a neck injury. Cliff Kingsbury is probably gone after the season. Their GM is gone with some health issues right now. Their offensive line cannot hold anyone. Their offense is broken. Their defense is falling apart. Byron Murphy is still dealing with a back injury. Zach Allen, their best defensive lineman after J.J. Watt, is not going to play this week. And I think that the Denver Broncos found some life recently. Their offense has been playing better. Their defense is still very good against the pass. I think that the Cardinals will struggle a lot moving the ball. Short week flying to Denver. with what could have been a very messy locker room kind of team right now. I think that the Broncos defense are going to shut them down for the most part, and that the Broncos offense has enough firepower to move the ball on that Cardinals defense that is lacking or is missing some key players. I still like this at -3. Big reason is that everything points toward Russell Wilson playing. Yesterday, there were beat reporters saying that he's progressing very well in the concussion protocol. Today, he was limited, so he's on path. To be honest, even if it's Brad Ripien, I will not be entirely mad about this number. But yeah, I just think that the Cardinals are in a bad spot to play at Denver this week.
Yeah, that was moved a little bit, so we'll be locking -3 soon at 1.9 there. Those banners were done just before we started, unfortunately. Drew, take this as your any other bet and then into your best bet here. So Falcons at Saints under 44.0 is the first.
Yeah, I'm against someone smart apparently because somebody moved the market from 43 to 44 today. Not expecting Desmond Ridder to be operating under some sort of wide open passing offense. That's not what the Falcons do. They don't have the weapons to do it. They're up against the Saints defense that I know is missing some pieces, but they can defend the run very well. This is a weird one that I don't understand in any way, shape, or form why this is at the key number of 44. I make fair total here 41.5. So this is the biggest discrepancy I have among all the totals. You have one wide receiver for the Saints and Chris Olave that matches up against AJ Terrell, which is not a good matchup. I don't think realistically that you're going to be very successful offensively if you're the Saints outside of whatever you're getting from your running backs. Yeah, this is a weird one. Not enough weapons in this game and not enough defensive injuries, I don't think, to support this much of a move from two pretty horrible offenses.
Okay, and then you're going to go to best bets, Drew. I'll stick with you. So it's Eagles at the Bears. You like Bears with the points.
I'm going to take the points. I don't entirely believe that the Eagles have solved their major issue on defense, which was their run defense. And I think in general, the Bears, in particular, Justin Fields, the element that he brings to the table is going to be a new wrinkle that the Eagles just have not had to deal with so far this season. The Eagles are still an amazing team. Yes, they are still rightfully at the top of the NFC. I have an enormous amount of at stake for Dick Sirianni to get the coach of the year, for the Eagles to get the most wins in the NFL. So I'm nervous. This may be a little bit of a attempt to hedge, I suppose, but 9 points is too many for a Bears team that's at home, that's coming off of a bye, and for an Eagles squad that felt extremely willing to give up garbage time points to the Giants last week. I would not in any way, shape, or form doubt their ability to do the same here for the Bears. And so I think ultimately Bears can stay inside of 2 scores.
Okay, and we'll move on to Rob's best bet, which is Steelers +3 at the Panthers. 1.9 currently we have.
Yeah, now that it's got out to this key number and you need basically Carolina to win by 4, I really like the Steelers in this spot. Now, we don't know who's going to be at quarterback necessarily. I honestly don't think it matters a whole lot. I think people kind of just underrate. I don't want to even say underrate, but if you just look at the numbers between Kenny Pickett and Mitch Trubisky this year, they have very similar yards per play, very, very similar success rates. But I want to focus in on Carolina a little bit and kind of pump the brakes on the Sam Darnold train. I think people just forget what Sam Darnold has been for the majority of his career, and what the Carolina Panthers are doing very differently now with Steve Wilks as head coach rather than Matt Rule is they're way more conservative. So Matt Rule had the Panthers passing on early downs a ton. Steve Wilks is the complete opposite. They pass on early downs just 36.8% of the time. It's extremely low. And if you look at last week's game for the Carolina Panthers, Sam Darnold's average depth of target was 4.2 yards. This is a very easy offense to contain, in my opinion. I think the Steelers will be able to shut down the run. They'll play close to the line of scrimmage. They'll force Darnold to either hold the ball longer, which is like a recipe for disaster for him, or have to take some shots, which is also a recipe for disaster for him. I just don't feel comfortable in the Panthers winning by margin. I don't think that there's much separating these two teams. I think you can make a sound argument that the Steelers are even better than the Panthers on a neutral field. Very reactionary, in my opinion, to last week's game, which I don't think was as impressive a performance as people think it was. for the Carolina Panthers against the Seattle Seahawks. I think that must maybe more to do with the Seahawks defense than anything else. So upgrade in defense that they're going up against. And like I said, I mean, the likelihood of this being a close game, I think, is extremely high. I'd love to have the +3 in a close game. Okay,
you touched on the Seahawks and the Panthers last week. Suma, that was your best bet. You got it up. You're going for another overplay here. Cowboys at the Jags, 1.94 over 48.0.
Yes, the Jaguars are one of the worst passing defenses in the league right now, in my opinion. I expect the Cowboys offense to move the ball very easily on them. And on the other side, the Jaguars offense, with the way that Trevor Lawrence is playing right now, is so good. They're getting better each week. And I think that the current state of the Cowboys defense is a little bit overrated because they are not elite against the run. You can kind of run the ball on them a little bit. They are down 2 starting cornerbacks, and they are a little bit declining. I think that Trevor Lawrence can have a decent game. They have the weapons to attack the Cowboys defense over the middle of the field. They can run the ball on them. So I think this one shapes up to be some kind of a shootout, in my opinion. I like over 48. Give me some 27-24 kind of game.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. We'll go for 2 in a row on the overs. Brilliant error there, guys. A little bit over. My thanks to Suma, my thanks to Rob, my thanks to Drew. Insights.matchbook.com, the place to find all the bets. You see our welcome offer running in the bottom of the ticker. Enter the bonus code Matchbook NFL and you get bet £30. You get a free £10 bet for the next 3 weeks as well. So we'll be back next week, one final time before Christmas. Until then, enjoy the playoff, or we're not even at the playoffs yet. Enjoy the games this weekend. Enjoy the Saturday games, particularly with Jeff Saturday's Colts. And we'll chat to you next week. Bye-bye.